Sick!
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jacob with City Fact Records, and thank you for joining us for the second ever episode of Coffee with the Facts, and the first ever virtual episode of Coffee with the Facts. And even though it's virtual, just know that we still have our coffees. For this episode of Coffee with the Facts, Pat and I sat down with the Blaney Brothers to discuss their brand new album, My Christmas List, A Pandemic Yuletide Tale.
Have a very Merry Christmas.
The Blaney Brothers are two incredible musicians from Connecticut, both multi-instrumentalists, songwriters, and vocalists, and they combine their efforts on this awesome album, which follows the main character Tim through a tale of Christmas despair and ultimately a pretty happy ending. If you haven't checked out the album yet, please follow the link in our description to the Blaney Brothers Bandcamp and take a listen right now before the interview. Now, since we couldn't do an in-person performance for this episode, Jeff Blaney sent us an awesome video of him doing a solo instrumental ukulele version of the title track to their new album, My Christmas List. So please enjoy that awesome performance and stick around for the interview. And if you haven't yet, grab that album right now. Yeah, this is our second official Coffee with the Facts interview and our first virtual Coffee with the Facts interview. So thank you guys for joining us. It should be fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to your new album now probably 3 or 4 times, and there's a lot to dig into here. So I'm hoping we can get into some of the nitty-gritty details in this interview. And I know you guys have a lot to say about it, Jeff. I know you mentioned the devil is in the details, so we'll try to dig in deep on this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I usually almost all the recordings that I've put out where I sang the tunes and I wasn't like a sideman on or what have you. I don't know. It's a little awkward talking about it just because it's only your thing. You know, you wrote the songs, you're singing the songs, you know, it feels so narcissistic. But this project was such a collaborative effort that I just find myself being able to talk about it for hours.
That's awesome. Well, that's good.
My brother wants to talk about it. You know, everybody that's involved has been kind of messaging and stuff, and it's just kind of exciting. So we're having fun with it.
Yeah, I know we talked about potentially trying to get everyone from the album onto like a Skype interview, but it'd probably get a little unwieldy with all the it's tough to have more than 4 people talking like virtually at once. So
yeah,
but you know, maybe in the future. But how many musicians worked on this album, and like was it primarily you and Rob being the mastermind behind this story, or was it truly like everybody was kind of contributing to both the songwriting and recording process?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So it started this whole project, and Rob, interrupt me if I get this wrong, because the sequence.
No, I won't. I don't want to interrupt you.
But it started. So Rob had a song, our Christmas song. And well, actually, he had like 1/3 of what ended up being on it. He had a verse and a chorus. And I think in previous years we had performed it once or twice, but we just kind of did that verse and chorus and then repeated it, and then we kind of fade out. And then I kind of pushed Rob to he rewrote an intro to it that was so great, and then I was trying to learn it on mandolin, and I said, go for another verse. Right. So we had that one song, and it started with that, and we were going to just record the song and release it as a single. That was the project originally.
Sure.
Right, because we normally would do Christmas shows, but there was going to be no shows this year.
Right. So we were like, all right, let's record the one song that we have from this act.
Yeah, I talked to Josh, the bass player, Josh Romanowski, back in maybe August or something, or maybe September, and he was talking about recording the Christmas song with you guys. And yeah, I thought, I was under the impression it was going to be like a single, and I had heard Rob bust that out a couple times at open mics, back in the day, going back a couple of years. So yeah, I was surprised when you guys were coming out with the whole album. So how did it evolve from there?
It just snowballed. I mean, so we did the one session with Rob, Rob's song, and then Justin, the drummer, who I had never met before this session, Rob called him in, and we just hit it off. You know how it is with musicians; every once in a while, it just clicks without really having to try too hard.
Sure. And
after we did the song, Justin was like, I have this Christmas waltz if you want to record that.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, that sounds great. Let's do it, And then I wrote a song. It was one of those sort of like, anything you can do, I can do better. One of those kind of things that kind of fueled me to write. So I wrote a song, and then, I don't know, we were just going to have a little EP at that point. And then I started to see how this little story could be interwoven between the songs, and then I wrote this story, typed it out, and it really kind of, the majority of the story kind of just came out. It just came out in like one little session on the computer, and then I forwarded that to the guys, and kind of it was just like a weird idea at first, but everybody came back. Rob and Josh and Justin came back like, oh, we love this, let's do more with this. Okay. And then Justin started sending me lyrics to songs that are just ideas, and he had one song, the Santa song, was almost all done, but it didn't have a chorus. So he had all of that song written already, but no, it had no chorus. So he sent it to me, and it just kind of felt like I had a hook. And I have something here for you guys. A lot of times you just will write down the lyrics on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And put it on the music stand. Maybe if it's a long song, you have 2 pieces of paper. To get through the Santa song, I created this. This is what it took to get through that song on the recording session.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an epic.
Justin got a little diarrhea of the mouth,
Yeah, right. But it's such a clever song, it's so funny. And the other thing that's so funny about that song is, so I worked up a chorus for it and sent it back to him, and he liked it. And so I got this together, kind of rehearsed it once or twice on my own. The band came in, we did the song, and that session we did 4 songs in one session. So this one was, it's like almost 8 minutes long, and we did it in one take. That we did. Oh, wow. Yeah. And honestly, I haven't sang it since. I think it's the only time that song has ever been played. It's the one that's on the record, because I know I haven't played it since, and no, I'm sure no one else has either. So it really was the whole project just kept moving like that. It was just like it just came out, and then our oldest brother Darren came in to it, and I asked him to narrate it. He said yes, and then he gave me some input before he came in to narrate it, and he was saying, you should have a song for one of the female characters, and so I immediately wanted a song for Eve. I was like, you're right, that would be great.
Yeah.
And then called Jen Richard on it because I knew that she had the musical ability to do it. And I said, do you have any ideas for here's the character, here's her situation. She's kind of in love with this guy, but he's blowing her off. But she's not a weak character, she's sort of a strong person. And I fired off this text to Jen saying, what do you got on this? And I want it to be on ukulele, which I know that she had one, but I also know that that's her second instrument is ukulele.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, same kind of deal. He fired back a video message to me in an hour's time and had 3/4 of that song done. And then I kind of guided her with that one, and we wrote another verse together and kind of reworked the last chorus and stuff. But I mean, the whole thing, it just started as this little tiny idea, and it just kept growing and growing. And every time I thought it was done, somebody else threw another idea at me, and I was just, the whole idea at that point was like, don't say no, just keep going.
So kind of diving into that story aspect. So like it is this like really cool story, like the chronicles in between and things are really neat. So like one thing I know as Jake and I were kind of listening through it, like one thing that we thought was like, how much of this like was inspired by real life? I mean, I know, kind of the Santa song maybe a little bit, stretched, but like how much, drew that, how much inspiration did you draw from like your own life and kind of from everybody's own life? Like how much did that play a role in putting the record together?
Rob, I'm going to take this one too, because I feel like the story is...
Yeah, sort of about you.
Yeah, right. I mean, it is. It's kind of my song. My dog of 11 years passed away earlier this year. Tim, the main character, Tiny Tim, he's not referred to as Tiny Tim, but all the characters I kind of stole from other Christmas stories. So anyway, Tim, he's sort of a musician that lost his job through the pandemic. Here we are, I'm staring at a few of them right now. So it's kind of my story, but I also knew that it was going to be everybody's story. And actually, it's funny because, so the opening line, let's see here, I have it here. The opening line was, I lost my job because of the pandemic. And then when Darren came in to narrate it, he pretty much read what I wrote. But the one biggest change that he made was it starts with, like many Americans, I lost my job due to the pandemic. And that one little addition in the very intro to his voice made such a huge difference. But a lot of it is my story. I didn't try to kill myself. It's funny. I feel like with the story, you got like, there's a suicide attempt. There's some drug abuse. There is, poking fun at Santa Claus. Yeah, right. The debauchery of Santa Claus. And I knew I was playing with a lot of ideas that maybe could trigger people or offend them. So the idea was to try to kind of walk the line of using these things that we're all kind of going through with the pandemic, but use them in a way that are, accessible to at least me, the idea of it, and also not shaming any of it either, because, it's a year like we've never seen before, obviously.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we were surprised at how dark the album gets at times, but I mean, I think it's a good album for this time, because I think a lot of people are dealing with whether it's drug abuse struggles or mental health struggles. Just if they didn't already have those types of things, they were certainly exacerbated with the pandemic. So yeah. It's a very relatable storyline. And yeah, when you mention changing the first line, it's like even though it's a specific story, the whole album feels very accessible to anybody. musicians or not, going through this pandemic kind of together, so to speak.
No doubt, man. Yeah, it's funny too how the quickness that I was talking about, the sort of just yes, yes, yes to ideas. It also like, so we, it's in the can a couple weeks now. It's been done, and I knew it was coming out in early December. So not only was it writing for current events, but it was writing for future events actually.
Yeah.
And trying to guess, how it would feel in December. And
Right.
I think with all of that, a lot of the songs that came up, it just has this sort of obviously very current feel to it. And that made it relatable because it's something that we're all going through. Jen threw out the line. The one time that the word vaccine is used is in Eve's song, the ukulele song.
Yeah.
And it's just mentioned very quickly, and then that's it. I didn't want to really linger on a lot of these issues too much, and I also definitely did not want to make any sort of political statement with it. I really wanted it to be more of just a story about what people are going through. But anyway, yeah, she dropped a bomb on that story with just by even using the word vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. But
yeah, it doesn't feel forced or like, I don't know, like isolating to any one side. It feels very relatable to me,
I think we're all kind of sick of all of that,
Yes.
So.
But I also liked it, it had its dark moments, but it also had those fun moments like Santa, and saving, Christmas, those kinds of things. So it was nice to see like that, very relatable. And then also like, hey, like, here's some like fun, some like holiday fun. It was a really cool like dichotomy there. So.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's funny how, so the part about the bass player's family getting, ended up testing positive for COVID, that's something that actually happened during the tracking of the album.
Okay.
And it led to, I think, in my mind, the best joke of the album, which is, he's talking about, how they had to scrap the project because the bass player, his family contracted COVID, and then himself, oh, who cares? Who would want to hear stupid Christmas music?
Anyway.
But that ended up just working its way into the story too. Again, it just kind of like, it took on its own life. It really did. It just sort of kept growing and growing in this really strange way. But it also, I feel like, luckily, because of the band that we have, with Rob's keyboard solo there in the intro, that piano solo is fantastic on the first song. And it definitely also gets you right away with, this is going to be a musical thing. It's yes, it's a storyline, but there's obviously going to be some real musical pieces in here too. And anyway, I love that piano solo. It's so good.
Thank you, sir.
So Rob, like kind of about that piano solo, did you like have the story ahead of time? Like, did you kind of like gauge the piano solo around like what it was about to like go into, or like how'd you think that? Did it just kind of come to you in like a dream or something, or?
So musically speaking, what that piano solo is completely in the intervals of sixths. The whole thing is sixths up and down. That's it. I don't switch, and that to me is a very Christmassy sound. Lots, there's lots of that interval is kind of all. I hear it in quite a bit of Christmas music. So I actually went into the solo thinking sixths. I'll just do sixths, and I just stuck to my guns. And even the last little run up the keyboard is just all sixths all the way up. So, like I made up my mind ahead of time, and then the solo just I just had to work it out and stick to that idea.
That's awesome.
That's cool. There's some debate in the music community as to whether or not there's anything musically that contributes to a Christmas song, or whether it's just the lyricism. So it's interesting. Some musicians like have certain ideas of, this chord sequence or this interval like gives me Christmas vibes.
Right.
Some people are just like, it's exclusively the lyrics. But I think enough Christmas songs kind of use similar techniques that you could probably make an argument for that.
There's no doubt about it. And I mean, what Rob just said there goes to show. So anyway, we have, for anyone that doesn't know, we've been doing this Christmas show for the last few years. We have, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours worth of Christmas music at this point, all covers, the standards. And when I wrote my Christmas list, the song, I did it like I've done with other genres that I kind of learned a lot. And I just picked up my book of covers. and just flip through and just grab some imagery. You know, I got the holly and the ivy. Rob does a beautiful version of the holly and the ivy. Silver and gold. I got silver and gold, and I just kind of flipped through and grabbed my book, and I had learned enough Christmas songs that they just kind of came out. And like with Rob's solo, you know, he had learned all this stuff too. So the fact that, and Josh plays on that too. So that I think the fact that we had studied Christmas music before this allowed us to it just came pouring out once we tried to do our own thing.
Helped to get the overall vibe. But it's sort of like Christmas music, like if you want to like put a finger on it or coin a phrase to it or whatever, it is kind of interesting that anyone can come up with a Christmas song and it immediately has the feel of Christmas. You know what I mean? Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the music, or, you know, just as long as the idea is there, that's all it takes, you know?
Right. Yeah. Maybe it's just the emotion that goes into it. There's a certain feeling of Christmas that is undeniable, kind of.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of musicians are somewhat inspired by the pandemic, or, you know, it's unavoidable to write songs that have lyricism related to the pandemic because everyone's going through it so much right now. But I was curious, like, what gave you the idea to join the Christmas with the pandemic for this story? Because that's really what kind of makes this unique.
That was just like a combination of it was really the timing of it. Like I said, we were going to do Rob's one original, and that was going to be it. And then the story kind of started coming to me, and I realized that, you know, we had just recorded a Christmas song and it's going to be released in Christmas. So therefore we'll merge the pandemic idea with the Christmas theme. And it was just so fun to do such a collaborative thing that didn't have, like, most of the time I'm like, all right, I'm going to get these collection of songs, I'm going to start recording and kind of lay out the album before it happened. But this it just came the way that it came. And
hey, Jeff, wouldn't you say that song Christmas Quarantine that Justin came up with was that was really like, we had my song, Christmas song, and then you wrote your tune. Both of these had nothing to do with the pandemic.
Right.
And then Justin, I think it was Justin's Christmas Quarantine. Like I think maybe it was that song that sort of spurred the whole idea on of fusing the two things and making the story.
Well, that was the first one that was written after the story was made. So like we had Rob's song, and then we had the Christmas Waltz. That was written before we even recorded Rob's song. That one's all Justin. He wrote the whole tune for that. And then my song, which was kind of not part of the story. So there we had three already that in the story, I wasn't even an idea. Then I came up with the idea for the story, and the Christmas Quarantine was the first one that was written specifically with that story in mind. And again, the same thing. It was amazing how quickly, once I came up with that story, Justin wrote all the lyrics to that song. And within 24 hours, I got an email back. Here's the lyrics. See if you can do something with the music. I picked up the guitar, and it just kind of wrote itself. But then, Jen's song, The Foolish Heart, that was written with, the Christmas story in mind. And then by the time we got to Santa, it's funny too, the Santa was not part of the story either, and it's such a huge chunk of the story too.
Yeah,
they kind of like that was the hardest part. Was basically I wrote the whole thing kind of around that Santa song, really.
Right. It's really the climax, and it happens right after like Tim is like in the darkest place through the story, and it's like the perfect, like, suddenly kind of Santa Claus appears and the magic comes back into his life, so to speak, because he's like at the bottom of this pit right before that song happens.
I definitely took, with the story at least anyway, I worked at the Hartford stage for years, and I worked the Dickens Christmas Carol a few times, and so I've seen the backstage, and I know all about that story. And then I'm a huge fan of It's a Wonderful Life too, and I realized that definitely It's a Wonderful Life is basically a retelling of Dickens Christmas Carol. And I'm a huge fan of both of those. They're both the same thing, down, 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 depressing, depressing, depressing. And then finally at the end, the Christmas magic happens. And so I kind of I basically did a third retelling of that same kind of idea, basically, with this one, but with music.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of good stories have that arc, you know.
Yeah.
And how much did you guys like track the whole thing together? Did you do like some parts remotely? Was it all in the studio together? Kind of what, was there anything recorded remotely or?
No, well, I mean, we definitely used our technology, our phones and stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't have one practice, you know.
Yeah.
We just Jeff had never met Justin. I told Jeff, I was like, listen, Justin should be the guy for the drums. And, you know, we went back and forth. I would send them a copy of my song, like me just singing it. And so we did the text messaging sort of and then Justin would come back with you mean something like this, and he would record himself playing it. So we didn't Jeff did all the tracking, but all the songs were done live with no well, the basic band was all live, one take, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Jeff did a little bit of overdubbing after we all left because we recorded in his garage, and we were concerned about COVID, you know, so like we were wearing our masks, keeping the garage door open. Yeah, until it came time to record, then we would close the garage door for sound purposes.
Sure.
And you know, and so basically we tried like hell to make it happen quickly, fast. And it was quick and fast, and then that was it. And then Jeff did all the rest of the overdubbing himself, with the exception of Jen coming and performing, and then my brother Darren coming and doing the narration. There was not a heck of a lot of tracking.
Justin,
go ahead, Rob. Did I've done a gig with Justin, which you guys all should, especially me, Jacob, and Justin, all same birthday.
Yeah, December
So
28th.
a birthday party band.
We have to make that happen.
Yeah,
But I had done a gig with him this summer, actually, with Fuse, and I substituted for Jan, who couldn't make the gig, on keyboard.
okay.
And at the end of the gig, I noticed that Justin was at the very tail end of the gig after we had played for like 3 hours. I noticed that Justin was using a visual metronome. He had been using it the whole gig. I didn't, unawares to not me, I didn't know, but he would like quickly set the metronome, and then we would play just like a gig. And at the end of so I asked him, listen, we want to record this live. We don't want to have any headphones on. We want to hear each other in this garage space. But we do want to be, you know, in sync with a click track if possible. And so that's what we did. Justin had his visual click track, and that was our metronome.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's awesome.
That's really hard to do.
Yeah. It's hard enough to play to an audio click, right? So
It was different. I've done a million recording sessions. I've never done one quite like that. Like Rob said, no headphones, but there was a metronome. You know, obviously bleed like crazy. You know, we were all in the same room. We didn't even attempt to try to stop the bleed. It was like, bring the bleed on, you know?
yeah.
And so all the vocals are live. Everything's live, really, except for I would overdub like one or two parts later.
Sure. Now, did you guys mix this yourself? Did you like bring in a like mixing engineer? Did you like bounce any like engineering ideas off of anybody, or what? How did that happen?
No, unfortunately, I did it all myself.
This sounds great.
Thank you. I mean, I know some people that are very talented in that way, and I know it would have sounded better if we had, you know, done that. But the upside to it, and we're also using Bandcamp to release it, just exclusively Bandcamp. And so honestly, the production overhead of this album is zero.
Beer and pizza.
Yeah, right. Beer and pizza.
A musician's wage.
So we just did it ourselves, and you know, I mean, I have to say it was, you know, being the person that kind of wrote it and then did the tracking with everybody. It did kind of overtake my life for a couple months there, but So at the end, I kind of ran out of steam, and one of the, the editing isn't quite what I should have taken another week to work with the editing and stuff. But I'm really happy with how it sounds, and I was so exhausted with it, and it was just, I had come to my end of my rope. And then like Rob was saying, we were fighting the COVID. I mean, when we did the first session, it was in August, and it was, Connecticut was COVID free at that point, like it was like, well, we weren't worried about it. And as the recording went along, it just got tighter and tighter to the point where Jen's song, the ukulele song, was going to be the band accompanying her with Rob on another ukulele. That song's awesome. I got three ukuleles on it, concert, tenor, and soprano, and then I overdid the bass line with my hand on the keyboard. But that was supposed to be the full band, and then Josh tested positive for the virus, so Rob and I got our tests right away. We knew we were in the clear, and I let Jen know about all of this. I let her know, and I was like, if you want to back out, no problem, But I got my test. I knew I was in the clear, and what we did was just she and I did it in the garage, and I was masked up the whole time. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we definitely walked the line of COVID almost shut down the production of this album, and maybe it should have. I don't know if we were as safe as we could be, though. And I don't know, mental health wise, you got to do something, Yeah. But I will admit that there was one moment where I was like, Josh just got it. Now, if my family gets sick, I got really guilty at one point, thinking this creative outlet that we're trying to have, maybe this selfish thing that gets both of our families sick here. Like another one of those just mind moments with COVID. That's just like mind numbing.
Yeah,
sure. I mean, I think a lot of people who are going to listen to this album, though, will be positively influenced by it. And I think at the end of the day, it's, there is some levity to it, and I think it is an inspiring story. So I think the good of your creative production will outweigh any of the potential risks. And it sounds like you guys were as careful as you could be. And a lot of musicians are kind of going through the same thing where you want to be safe, but you can't put your life completely on hold for an entire year without suffering some, I don't know, loneliness, depression. So there's got to be a balance. So I'm happy. I mean, there couldn't be a better time to release this particular album. I mean, it's just perfect for the moment. So.
Well, I gotta say, thanks to you guys too. I mean, I know how hard I worked with an indie label when I was in Nashville, and I know the struggle of trying to do it. It's an undertaking that you guys are doing right now, and the Connecticut music scene needs you guys. We need this kind of thing. So all the kudos in the world to you guys for doing what you're doing here and taking on our record and helping us with it. We really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess to that point, it's like there's a lot of people making great music, and there's a lot of an audience for that, and it's tough to merge those two things together a lot of the times, because maybe the right people aren't seeing it at the right time. And it's important for everyone to try to listen to as much local music as possible, I think, because there's a ton of great stuff going on. Not everyone can listen to everything, but if you've got great artists in your area, I mean, what better way to support them than buying and listening to their music, especially now when you can't go out to see a gig.
No doubt.
I mean, doing the open mic as long as I did, or open mics, I got to see a lot of original people who came out and performed, Yeah. And probably 5% of them have a decent recording of their stuff, And it would be great if like all these people had a decent recording,
Yes.
For people to listen to. So hopefully that starts to happen more.
Yeah, that's one thing we want to help with too. I mean, it's awesome that you guys have the equipment and the ability, and Jeff, your ear for mixing and production, obviously, to like get a work like this together, because I know it, like you said, it's a huge undertaking. and by the end of it, you are kind of pulling your hair out, especially because I do this kind of thing too, but especially as a musician who isn't necessarily a mixing engineer in background.
Right.
It's tough to get like a polished piece of art or music out to the world. So, but it's fortunate that you guys were able to do that. I mean, it's awesome. But we'd love to offer those kind of services to other local musicians too, because there's some people who are really talented and don't have the equipment or know-how at all to work around a recording.
Yeah, and it's nice. We've got, I've got a space here, so I'm hoping as kind of, COVID evolves and we, figure out what's going on, and as the, safety things roll out, that we can start bringing some people in. So.
Yeah, that'll be awesome when you can finally break through. You guys, if you can stick through a few months here, it's going to be nice for you.
It is funny though, the remote thing is hip, like, to be honest with you, this record wouldn't have happened. So the way that my year worked out, the pandemic happened in March, and my good friend John Shilowski, who works for the Factory Underground, he actually hired me to do some guitar tracks in March for this girl that had this EP, this Americana EP, and they wanted some mandolin and stuff like that. So I got the call for that, a good paying gig, and my stuff had been in the box. So I set it up and I did the tracking for that, and that was great. And then my stuff was set up, so I was like, I'll just start recording. And then I recorded a whole album in March by myself, just me and the guitar.
Okay.
Put that out, and then Rob and I did another song together in the summertime, and then it eventually turned into this Christmas thing. And none of that would have happened if I didn't get the guitar gig in March to get all my equipment out of the boxes that they had been sitting in for years.
Right.
And so, like, the remote thing can really lead to some awesome stuff too. I mean, it's a little obviously more technically advanced for people to send WAV files and things like that, Dropbox, and it gets tedious, but
sure.
Yeah,
our band has a 100 gigabyte Google Drive shared folder, so we're doing that all the time. Luckily, all of us are technologically savvy enough. We have like our audio interfaces, and we can record high quality audio remotely. And we're very thankful for that. I know not everybody can do that, obviously, but yeah, we'll drop WAV files. Someone will run point on the session, drag everything in, and do some mixing work. And it's like, I can't imagine going through this type of pandemic without the technology that we're so lucky to have today. So it has been like eye-opening in a lot of ways, I think.
Right. I mean, no doubt that this whole album wouldn't have happened without the pandemic being what it is. I mean, just the fact that, the band was able to get time enough to be in one room together. I mean, on a normal year, there's no way that those four musicians would have a bunch of Saturdays off to work. I mean, actually, it was only two. We did 2 band sessions.
Wow.
But, and I don't know, I just had a ball with it. I mean, for me, I've done a lot of recording songs and putting out songs, and some songs that maybe had stories in them and things like that. But all the tracking behind the chronicles, behind our brother Darren's voice, coming up with sound effects and then linking the instruments. I don't know if you guys were hip to this, but Skinny, the homeless man, whose real name is Jack, and he lives in a box. Jack in the Box, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Every time he's in there, the xylophone is in there, and Eve is connected with the ukulele. Every time you see Eve or hear Eve, the ukulele is there. Tim, the character Tim, he's like a rock musician or whatever, so he has the full band behind him. He's got like his electric guitar and stuff, and yeah, I don't know. It's just fun, just kind of coming up with these ideas of how the mandolin is with the dog. Every time the dog, Clarence, the dog is there, the mandolin comes in, and then a reprise when it's sort of Clarence's ghost, which actually that was sort of our brother Darren. That was his input, was when he first read it. It's funny because that he has a suicide attempt and his dog dies, and I always thought everyone was going to be like, oh man, that's I can't believe he almost killed himself. No one talked about the suicide at all. And every single person that read it was like, oh man, the dog, man. the dog.
Yeah, they pull the heartstrings.
Yeah. But he was the one. I didn't have the ghost of the dog coming back at the end, and Darren was the one that was like, you should have the dog come back, and he hadn't thought of the ghost idea, but just maybe. But anyway, then it became like, oh, this is like Yoda's ghost coming back at the end of the Star Wars,
right. Right. Yeah, and it's nice. It's just a little appearance, but it gives a little bit of a lift to the story, like after it goes to those dark moments. But I did catch some of those, I guess the musical voices associated with some of the characters, and it reminds me of if you've ever listened to Peter and the Wolf. But it's like a whole story that they go through, and at the beginning they're like, the duck is the bassoon, and then the bassoon player kind of plays a little line,
cool.
and they go through all the characters. Yeah, so yours was a little more subtle, but yeah, I love that kind of thing. And sometimes when you put those nuances in, you're worried, like, I don't know if everyone's gonna catch this, but if anything, it's like, it's for your own self. It's kind of nice knowing you put that kind of nuance into it.
That feeling of like, I don't know if this is going to work, or maybe this is going to sound stupid or come across. That was the feeling I think everyone had every step of the way with this thing.
Yeah.
Like Justin and I, writing these songs back and forth, I didn't even know him. I still don't. We did the 2 recording sessions together, and we're friends now, but I barely know him, and we wrote a couple songs together, and asking Darren to narrate parts on a concept Christmas album. He was definitely out of his element there. And Jen, like I said, the ukulele she plays, and she plays well, but that's her second instrument. And like Rob came in on that second session, and like he said, we had no rehearsals, and here I am saying, okay, play a perfect solo live with no editing. I think everybody kind of had that like awkward. I think we all were kind of like, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just try it,
Yeah. What's the worst case scenario? It's a low risk, high reward scenario.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Especially with COVID.
Yeah.
So diving into a little bit about like the Blaney Brothers, you guys as musicians. Well, first of all, one more question about the story. I mean, we might have some more there too. Pawn Shop Strat, Jeff, was that really your first guitar? That was one thing that kind of stood out to Jake and I. We wanted to ask.
Yeah, it wasn't a Pawn Shop Stratocaster, but it was a Stratocaster. Okay. And I wish I still had, and then I kind of, my second Stratocaster was the one that has now, like, all I have left of my second Strat is the body, and it's all been reworked. So that was, and oddly enough, the funny thing about that is, no, that's not really true. But the other part with the fake ID and starting to play in bars when I was 19, that is true. Actually. And I wrote that in there, and then I was like, I probably just admitted to a federal crime.
Rob can probably attest that I was playing some open mics when I was probably 16 or 17.
Open mics
and gigs, but
yeah. I mean, we'll get back there eventually. Yeah. Right now, no one's playing gigs, but
no.
It's okay, I think, for young people to get out there playing. And actually, that was part of, we were talking about the local music thing with you guys and all that. Like, when I was in New Orleans, I realized one time watching these young kids on stage that, like, the culture down there is, it's cool for a kid to be a tuba player.
Right.
Like, he's going to get the girls if he's a tuba player. Whereas here, it's like, you're a nerd in the band if you play tuba or whatever, So, but I think that's changing. I think especially now everybody's embracing the arts. It feels like a little bit.
Yeah, I hope it continues to trend that way.
Yeah.
So, like, do you guys have like other musicians in the family, or is it just you guys, or?
Well, our older brother there was really, we had no musicians in, our grandparents, parents, no. I mean, mother sang in like cantatas at church.
Okay.
But my older brother got interested in it when he was about 16, and my father bought him a piano, and he also played drums in the high school band, and that's definitely, without Darren, we definitely probably wouldn't have played or might not have played. So yeah, not really. Although we also have cousins who are younger than us who are
The
awesome.
Gravel Project. Yeah, you guys got to check out the Gravel Project if you have never heard of them before.
Gravel
Gravel
Project.
Project
Gravel
in
Project.
Austin.
They're really
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Are they Connecticut?
They live in Boston.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, and that's my mother's maiden name is Gravel, so they're our maternal cousins, and that's their last name, Gravel. And Andrew and Jordan are on par with both of you guys.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. Actually, they're coming out. They had a record that was slated to come out this year, and because of COVID, they ended up just doing one single after another. Is how they're releasing that. But they recorded one of my songs, and that's going to be coming out pretty soon too. And he was sending me the mixes and stuff, so that was another sort of like remote creative thing that I had going this year. It was hearing these guys, and they made my song. It's a song called "Saving Up My Love." It sounds way better than any time that I've ever tried to sing it or play it. So it was really cool to see that come about too. But like our grandfather, he was, obviously that's where the name Blaney comes from. And he was 100% Irish. And when Rob and I first started, everyone, was requesting Irish and expecting Irish. And we didn't know any. I think maybe Rob knew Whiskey in the Jar or something like that. But yeah, he was actually like, no, he rejected all of it. He was like, I'm an American, So we learned it all on our own. People kept requesting these songs, and just sort of out of the situation that we were on the gigs and stuff, that we were forced into the Irish music. But then once we got into it, it was so awesome. We just loved it.
That's interesting. My grandfather, his parents my great grandparents were immigrants, but it's interesting how 100 years ago, a lot of immigrants tried to suppress their heritage almost, and try to blend into the melting pot. And now you kind of have to put in your own footwork if you want to revisit that heritage, which you guys have. I mean, you do a ton of St. Patty's Day gigs like around that time, or I guess you would have been, like as you mentioned, that like COVID kind of hit right as that like probably peak period for you guys.
Yeah.
Around.
Yeah, not good time.
Yeah. Have you guys always played together, or did you have your own kind of separate musical journeys and then kind of come together like a little later in life with your collaborative project?
Jeff is I'm 4.5 years older than Jeff, so when I went to college, he was just starting high school, and so I started getting gigs pretty quickly after starting college, like 18, 19 years old.
Okay.
And Jeff had not been playing at that point, but anyways, like maybe a year later, I went home, and Jeff had been writing songs. I was like, wow, you're freaking really good, and probably within about 5 or 6 years after that, we started playing together in a band. But it wasn't like we were playing a lot at the house. We never did growing up,
Okay.
Yeah.
And when Rob started, my dad used to take me out, and not a ton, but a few different places, a few different bars and restaurants and stuff. I went out and saw Rob play with his band, in high school, and the lead guy, our buddy Kurt Gott, is just an uber talent. He's so good. He can sing his ass off. He can play guitar. He's one of these people, he doesn't even think about it. It just comes naturally to him. So I was this young kid watching these guys, on stage and just idolizing them, and I just wanted to do everything that Rob was doing. And it just seemed like such a cool thing to do. So I just started imitating, basically monkey see, monkey do, basically.
Yeah.
And what about some of like your musical influences? I mean, I noticed Tim on the record, one of his is John Prine, who's a big one of mine as well. But like, who are some of the influences that you grew up with, or that you have, that you kind of attribute some of your songwriting and musicianship to?
Yeah, Prine's a big one. I spent 10 years in Nashville and just came back a few years ago. So I got that country music and bluegrass music just kind of crammed down my throat. I'm glad that I did. I ended up really loving it a lot more than I expected to. But I don't know. Growing up wise, I mean, to be honest, we were listening to our dad was huge on Neil Young, you know, the Beatles, that kind of Bob Dylan. Funny because our dad, he was surprised when I started playing the country and bluegrass music. He was like, "What is this shit for music?" You know. He's like, I brought my friend Brian Skelly was just saying the other day. He texted me. He was like, I remember your dad came in during a bluegrass rehearsal. And he was like, I raised you on good classic, good old rock and roll, and you're playing this shit kicker music. What are you doing, man? But he liked the rock. We got every Billy Joel album as soon as it came out.
Oh, yeah.
We love, me and Pat and I love Billy Joel. I know that.
We did.
I know Rob busts out a Billy Joel song every now and then at the jams.
You are the one who got me learning Big Shot.
Oh, Big Shot, yeah. Yeah, that was a fun one. Yeah, I miss playing with you, man. Hopefully we can get back to it, you know. I'm in Brooklyn, New York now, so I mean, even just the distance, it's been hard, but because I have such a big musical family in Connecticut, and Rob being part of that, and Jeff, I'm sure we would have gotten the opportunity to play together. Maybe, hopefully in the future we will as well, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm always back and forth because there really is a great musical community in Connecticut that will always kind of have my heart, and I love playing with so many guys up there.
I tell you though, man, I mean, you know, not to sound like, you know, whatever, but anyway, and now with COVID, it is what it is, but yeah. I've been in your shoes. There was 2 years I moved into Manhattan 2 weeks before 9/11 happened. So I was there. I saw that with my own eyes and smelled it and tasted it and everything. And then we moved from there to a place in Brooklyn, and then I moved all around Brooklyn. I lived in like 3 different places in Brooklyn, and I kept coming up to Connecticut for gigs, you know, because I had people, and like you said, you got a family, you got, you know, I had Rob to do gigs with, and it was great. But, you know, once I moved out of New York and that experience came and went, which it might not for you, maybe you'll be down there, you know, for the rest of your life, but most people have like a period of time, and then, you know, most people don't settle in New York City.
Sure.
And I realized that I should have spent less time driving back up to Connecticut and doing gigs and playing rehearsals with my buddies there, and more time just pounding the pavement and doing, you know, no pay gigs in New York. But, you know, it's a tough nut to crack, man. As you know, it's even to get a non-paying gig there is hard.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that feeling a lot, or I was, you know, prior to the pandemic, but there's so many amazing musicians here. It's intimidating. And when you grow up in a musical community that is so like welcoming and like
inviting.
Yeah. Right. And also you feel a bit of the big fish in the small pond kind of vibe. And anyone who moves to New York is going to be tiny fish in a gigantic pool of amazing musicians. So it's very intimidating. But it's a good experience. And yeah, I hope to pound the pavement more, so to speak.
Yeah, keep doing those non-paying, you know, 3 a.m. slots at open mics or whatever, man, because it's, you know, it's well worth the experience. It's tough though. It's tough to come up with the money to stay down there, you know? Yeah,
that's true too.
Yeah,
that's true too.
It's like, keep in mind too that out of all those musicians in New York, none of them are going to bring the Jacob pot.
Right.
Only one person bring that.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, it's hard. I've, you know, musicians forget that a lot. We're very, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but we're very insecure, you know, and it's important to remember like what you bring individually to things and not always be so into comparing yourself to everyone else. But it's hard to do that, you know. Our brains are kind of wired that way, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. And if you cross the line too far, now you're an egotistical maniac jerk. Or like finding that, you know.
Yeah. Hopefully I won't ever get there.
I've been there. It's better to be humble, you know.
Yeah.
Rob Blaney, damn it! Rob Blaney, damn it!
Do you know me right now?
Yeah, Rob was always a diva at any of the gigs I played. This has been awesome.
This has been great.
We're probably gonna do some more virtual interview stuff like this in the future. I mean, it's great to see that this format kind of worked out, because I've never done anything like this before. It's
well, there you go. That's what I'm saying. This project keeps going and keeps pushing people into play. It's happened like 10 times on this record, and here we are. I've been interviewed on things before, never like this. So
yeah,
it's kind of been the theme of the whole project. Really, it's been really fun to watch it happen.
Yeah, it's been fun to listen to the album and to take part in this, and where City Fact Records is like a very new thing too. So Jeff reached out to me initially with the idea to kind of work together on this release. So I appreciate that, Jeff, because the idea is for it to be mutually beneficial. I mean, the more the platform grows, the more reach it will potentially give to new artists, and every new artist brings with them their own audience that gets introduced to the platform. So yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad we were able to do some stuff with this.
Yeah, man. Likewise, it's you're giving us another channel to, another platform to kind of show people what we did. So we really appreciate it.
I know I'm excited to go listen to it again too, after like talking about some of those nuancy things, like going back with I always do I'm like a firm believer in a passive listen where you're kind of like, you're there, but it's in your ears. Then like a really active listen where like all your focus is on it. And then just kind of like another active listen. But like now I feel like there's so many like little hidden Easter eggs that I'm going to go through and catch kind of after this. So I think it's going to be a neat opportunity for people to kind of like unveil that like mystery behind recording and some of the like fun things that just kind of happened like organically.
I'm hoping too that, so like once the story idea happened, Rob's initial thing was, we got to make a film. This could be a short film, which would be wonderful, and like hopefully that happens. And then my initial idea was a musical, a stage production. But then before the idea of having Darren narrate it, it was like, how do you get that? So now it's COVID. We have like a month to get it in the can and get it out there. So like clearly none of those ideas are going to happen, because they take, preparation and big casts of people together, and that's not going to happen. So then the idea dawned on me to have the script be a download attachment to the 7 songs. And I was like, oh, that's cool, but then I thought about it more, and I'm like, it feels like homework. Like, who's going to download the album, then download the thing, and then sit there and read it, and that's when the idea came to me, like, let's do a narration of it, which kind of made it almost not like a book on tape, but it's got that sort of book on tape element to it. And even within the concept album world, I feel like it lands in its own very unique category.
Yeah.
And we pulled it
sort of like
we got this story out there this year amidst all this stuff. But hopefully there will be a stage production in the future,
Yeah, and it kind of like an audio movie. Like, I definitely know that, like, in my brain, I've built out a Tim and an Eve and a Jack, right? Like, and everybody, and as I was giving it that active listen, I was kind of like closing my eyes, and I could totally see like the apartment and kind of all of those things. So it was a really cool, like, totally different experience than like just an audiobook or a traditional record. It was really neat.
People ask me what it is, and I don't really know how to describe it. I've been calling it a concept album, but it's not your typical concept album.
Sort of like Prairie Home Companion almost, or some NPR.
Yeah,
the moment where Darren says, Skinny, he disappeared, and I do the xylophone, he disappeared. That really felt like an old-time radio show to me. That's the moments I'm talking about where, like, there were some moments during this that I was like, okay, I've never done anything like this before, but it did. I felt like a sound effects guy on Prairie Home Companion.
It's interesting when you start to like attempt some of those things, you realize how much information your brain has pooled over the years, that you're like, oh, maybe like I've never done sound effects before, but they've just been so subconsciously ingrained. You're like, you kind of have a knack for it that you maybe didn't expect.
Yeah, I wish that Rob had been able to be a part of that process for 2 reasons. One, because it was just wicked fun, but also I'm happy with how it came out. But that was one downside to the COVID kind of putting a stranglehold on it at the end. I would have liked to have Josh on the on the ukulele song. It ended up being a keyboard bass line, but I don't think it really, the song still sounds really good to me, audio wise anyway. So it's fine. But yeah, it does have that kind of like radio hour quality to it a little bit, or like Mystery Science Theater or something like that.
I think it'll be a really fun listen for people, especially as we all kind of like, there's not a lot to do, and radio acting is kind of that, thing of the past, and you find these really neat things like few and far between. So
that was amazing. We filled up an entire hour pretty easily. Wow. Thank you guys so much. This went, way better than I would have even imagined, and your album sounds so good. I hope anybody who's watching this interview will go out to Bandcamp, support some local musicians, and buy and download the album, listen to it at your leisure, play it for your family at Christmas time. But yeah, I think it's got a lot of relatable messages that everyone's going to really love.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on. Coffee with the facts. All right.
Coffee with the facts. We all have our mugs. Yeah, we'll have to do it.
We'd like to thank the Blaney Brothers for sitting down to talk with us and performing. Once again, we've got their link in the description to download their album, My Christmas List, A Pandemic Yuletide Tale.
I've got the holly and the
And remember to dream big,
take action, and support local music.
I've got
Yo, high five.
mistletoe and Yuletide cheer, but the thing I want the most is for you.
yeah.